Welcome back to In Ohio Country Today, and joining me now is Anne Cooke, and Anne is the Safety Director for Custom Agri Solutions. Anne, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I'm glad to be here.
We're here on Safety Day here at the Ohio AgriBusiness Association's annual conference. You're speaking today, and why don't we talk a little bit about some of the safety topics you're going to be discussing?
Yeah, I'm very excited actually to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's bin sweep safety. So it's not something that we talk about all the time in the grain industry. It's really part and parcel to what grain operations personnel know as general equipment. But it is also very dangerous equipment and deserves to have some attention brought back to it from when it was originally highlighted back in 2013, so it's coming up on its 10-year anniversary of when the bin sweep safety rules were published by OSHA.
Let's talk about those rules.
Yeah, so the biggest one is just making sure that we keep our workers free from the entanglement hazard that comes with any kind of a rotating piece of equipment like an auger or a paddle drag. So putting in those engineering controls that I'll talk about this afternoon, like barriers, guarding, administrative controls like procedures and making sure that confined space entry rules are followed as part of bin sweep operation. And then also reminding our folks in today's audience about the why around bin sweep safety. So we can talk about the operational procedures all day long, but it's really important for our grain personnel and our farm customers to understand why those rules exist and to follow them not just in practice but in spirit too.
Yeah, the Ohio AgriBusiness Association is all about that networking with other businesses and making sure that that gets translated down to the producers. So what's that next level that has to take place to make sure that our producers are doing what they're supposed to do to be safe?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have the same degree of resources that traditional grain elevators would have, so it's really relying on folks like OABA and our industry associations to share that with our membership, like farm bureaus, and making sure that those resources are made available to them. And again, the educational materials, because I think they understand some of the basics, but not the ones that are probably going to keep them alive.
And you're looking at things that they have to do repetitively to make sure they're crossing the T's and dotting the I's so they don't put themselves in hazard way in any way, shape, or form. So what are some of the things that you could tell our producers out there to make sure that they're safe on their farm?
It all boils down to some of the basics like a buddy system. So a traditional farmer doesn't have to follow confined space entry permits and that type of thing, but always have a buddy system and an attendant there to help and to keep an eye out for them. And then it's some of the basics on the inside of the tank, like making sure that the sump holes have grading and covers over them so that feet and legs don't fall through to the unload augers down below the floor. Making sure the guarding is on those augers and those paddle drags so that there's no entanglement hazard. And then of course it's the obvious one of not getting close enough to get entangled.
Yeah. You know, what we find is communication is probably the key to just about everything. Whether you're putting things out there, what they need to do to be safe on the farm, posting things that they need to know, who visit the farm so that they're safe. But that buddy system that you talked about, that communication, letting people know where you're at, what you're doing, how long you expect to be there, and making sure that you have that connection with somebody is probably the easiest thing that we can do. And then sometimes our producers forget.
Like we talked about before, I grew up on a farm, so I kind of understand the mentality of the get her done in the heat of season, right? So they have tunnel vision at times and don't always listen to the little voice that's chirping at them on their shoulder. So that's where that spotter, that buddy system comes in to remind them of the things that they're not thinking of and making sure that they're not in the line of fire with these entanglement hazards. But also, I think there's a pretty strong piece of complacency in there. You know, farmers are just used to that type of environment, and those dangerous pieces of equipment are just normal for them. And I think we have to make sure that we're addressing that complacency factor as well.
You know, it's also important, too, that our producers know that they're talking with somebody who comes to them with credibility and experience. So let's talk a little bit about growing up on the farm and your family operation.
Yeah, so I didn't actually grow up with any on-farm storage, which makes me a little bit unique because, you know, storage bins and augers and all of that were only something I saw at the local grain elevator. But I definitely understand the mindset of a farmer and the demands of harvest season and getting getting done what needs to be done, sometimes no matter the cost. And that's the part that I'm really trying to overcome. And honestly, that's my passion for the subject. Is just I have a soft spot in my heart for farmers.
Yeah, no doubt. We did talk about communication, but I think the other thing you just touched on is making sure that you're not in a hurry and trying to remind them that time could save your life.
Yes, time and planning. So one of the things I talk with my crews about all the time is when you get that phone call from the farmer that's distressed because their bin sweep isn't working, it's getting them to slow down a little bit as we're talking them through it on the phone. Sometimes it's our own teams that have to slow down a little bit, making sure that we're not rushing into something and putting ourselves at risk. And then we also talk about the remoteness factor of some of these storage bins are out in the middle of nowhere and don't necessarily have a mailbox out front with an address on it so that we know who to call and where to send people if there's an emergency. So we have to get pretty creative. Thankfully, latest technology allows us to drop a pin on a phone and send it to somebody and tell them where to find us because there's no address for where we are.
And we talked a little bit about what you do for Custom Ag, but before we let you go, why don't you talk a little bit about what Custom Ag, what they do for our producers?
Yeah, so I love working for Custom Agri Systems. I've been there about a year. It was a year earlier this month. They just had their 40-year anniversary, so started in 1982 with Rick and Esther Storch. The Storch family still owns and operates it. 11 branches in 6 states, millwright, electrical, and fabrication services. So we design, build, construct, and service all of the equipment that we put together, as well as work with our branded partners to install their equipment as well.
Farm safety is what it's all about, and that's what the Ohio AgriBusiness Association, what they do with their business partners like Custom Ag and like Anne, to bring her here today to talk about safety so that you can be better producers, but also be safe and healthy at your operation. Anne Cooke has been our guest, safety director, coordinator, if you will, for Custom Ag here in Ohio. And Anne, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
And we'll be back with more in Ohio Country today, right after this.